Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Game and Friday, August 4th, 2017 edition of VR News. Some really interesting VR stories. Want to start with a couple of quick things. First, no Exidy on this Gaming Friday. He's on assignment for an employer. So that means I'm going to be able to focus on VR gaming for Gaming Friday, which will be kind of cool. Exidy, hopefully back next week. Also, and this is really neat, from time to time, you guys will talk in the comment section about some cool upcoming VR purchase. And generally, I'll ask if you can share that with me so I can share that with the viewers. Exactly what viewer Daniel Fritz did, sent me this picture of his View VR, just arrived. Look at this freaking behemoth of a unit. So he said I could share some of the details. Price-wise, $730 US we know is the price, but after broker fees, shipping, warehouse fees, $1,500 US all in for him. Also, the instructions were incomplete in the box, but a quick phone call, they sent him a PDF, he was good to go. There was a game bundled in, and unfortunately, his in-game avatar kept coming apart at the seams, literally. So another call to the company, and they indicated to use VorpX. Now, for me, that would not be a desirable default position. Daniel was okay with that, and that's what counts. But personally, haven't had a lot of great experiences with VorpX. But again, everybody's mileage is going to vary on that. Daniel's going to update us when he's had some more time, some leisure time to really put this thing through its paces. Next up, we're starting to get some impressions based on hands-on experience with the HP Windows VR headsets. Last week, pretty much all about the Acer units. Well, UploadVR's David Jagneaux did a hands-on with the HP. Not going to get into the specs. We pretty much know they're identical. Price-wise, however, the HP unit, $30 US more, coming in at $329.99 US. Same sparse packaging as the Acer unit. Seems to be the status quo for this, these initial dev units. Setup process, according to David, was pretty frustrating. The instructions not as clear as they could have been. Also, if you're going to get one of these, make sure your Windows 10 is completely up to date. Apparently, a lot of the Windows VR code in those updates. And if you don't have those updates, well, the installation process doesn't necessarily indicate that to you. That could lead to some frustration. Things he liked: the visor flip up, tracking, smooth, frame rate steady, screen door effect about the same as the Rift or the Vive. Also saw a tweet from Rick King, who's involved in the VR industry, and he indicated that his tests likewise bear out frame rate pretty smooth. Just to add, he's got a 670 MX graphic card in his laptop. Let's just say that's not state of the art. It's about half a decade old, but he indicated ran everything just fine. Now, we got to keep in mind that's not gaming, it's application based, but still seems to indicate what Microsoft said about them catering to low-end graphic cards, at least for applications, seems to hold true. Next story, AltspaceVR throwing their final farewell party last night, 7 p.m. Pacific time, August 3rd, 2017. The AltspaceVR servers shut down for the last and final time. They had an RSVP to the event. The last tweet from the official AltspaceVR account, kind of somber, shows a gif of a lonely campfire crackling away under a starry night with noticeably no one in attendance. So like I said, pretty somber stuff. What I am curious about, guys, is how the future is going to view them, not just as an app, but basically their life cycle. That's going to be an interesting one, I think, 5-10 years from now to revisit. Then we have the company Wearality. They've just designed a new Fresnel lens thinner than a quarter. Now, these guys 2 years ago created a unique Fresnel lens for VR headsets. They called it Sky, claimed it offered 150-degree field of view, had a Kickstarter. The Kickstarter was successful. Well, now they've got this new lens design, and you can see compared to older ones like the Oculus Rift, the Sony PlayStation, and of course the Fresnel lens on the HTC Vive. The new one noticeably thinner. Well, Road to VR staff at the VRTO event this June had an opportunity to meet the Chief Technical Officer for Wearality, a fellow by the name of David Smith, and he indicated that they had some tricks in store to fix the aberrations. So it'll be interesting to see when we get some first-hand accounts when these show up in units, if they do show up in commercial units. Road to VR did some other hands-on stuff. They indicated that the Fresnel artifacts that were present in the previous Sky lens weren't in this one. However, and they couldn't put their thumb on exactly what it was, but this new lens just seemed to be lacking a little bit in terms of clarity. However, they did manage to get rid of the God Ray artifact, common in the Rift and the Vive, depending on what application you're using. This lens managed to get rid of that. All right, I'm a pretty science-based guy, but I gotta admit, every once in a while, it's kind of cool to have those what-if conversations, you and your buddies, weird topics. For one individual, one of those topics, near-death experiences. This might be the type of story you'd expect on a Friday the 13th if you are superstitious. I'm not, so I'm gonna jump right in. But a fellow by the name of John Snitzer, for basically the past 16 years, has been waiting for virtual reality technology to catch up to be able to do something. And that something, well, it started all those 16 years ago. Somebody approached him, a friend, with a near-death experience, how he left his body and then ultimately returned to it. That got him researching every near-death account he could find. His statement: I thought it would be amazing to document this, but if you film this, you just watch someone else's experiences. I thought it would be cool to film something in 3D, 360, but I decided to wait until VR was at that point where we could put people into the experience and have that visceral and emotional connection. A lot of the research he did had the familiar report of feeling like they were in a vortex, heading towards a light, another common experience. The results of all of that, a collaboration with a company called 3D Live Entertainment, using Epic Games' Unreal Engine to give people a VR account of one woman's near-death experience. So in VR, it's a 5-minute experience, and it has the macabre name of Flatline VR. You gotta love that. Beyond the expansion and the extraction of the color spectrum, there's a feeling in this of falling, spinning, and turning. So hopefully those of you with VR motion sickness, this doesn't set you off, because it sure sounds like it could. There's a lot to the experience crammed into those 5 minutes, so definitely something they recommend you try firsthand. Like I said at the outset, I'm a pretty science-based guy, a bit of a skeptic, and do, require a lot of evidence for stuff. Doesn't mean I can't have interesting discussions or read about stuff that, to a lot of people might seem really far out. One example, a fellow by the name of Terence McKenna. He had an interesting thought where he basically said, look, the pineal gland, we know what it's responsible for, melatonin. Science has found DMT naturally occurring in this gland. So what his thought was, okay, well, we know that when you're happy, time seems to go quicker. When you're sad or at work, time can really drag on. Your perception of time completely different for the exact same set of hours. Furthering his thought, he said, well, what if when you die, the pineal gland releases that DMT and time dilation is such that 1 second, 1.5 seconds for you feels like an eternity. Interesting food for thought. Not sure I buy it, but like I said, fun discussion for you and buddies to have. Well, guys, that is it for the Gaming Friday edition of VR News. Hopefully you guys have an awesome Gaming Friday. Get your gaming in. The weekend is upon us. Cheers, guys.